This is lesson 8. It's the final lesson on Beatrice. I hope you've enjoyed all the sessions. I started off by performing Beatrice myself, then I looked at the scales, then I played and analysed both solos from Stan Getz and Joe Henderson. And now in this final lesson, I'm just going to look at the harmony and perhaps give you an insight into why Sam Rivers chose certain chords, and maybe are they unrelated or are they related? Check it out, see what you think. I hope you've enjoyed all the lessons, and this is lesson 8. This is the 8th and final lesson of Beatrice. I'm just going to look at the chords and then maybe talk about some of the ideas of why those chords are there and how to approach the piece as a whole. Beatrice is a piece of music that is made up of 16 bars, and it's in the key of F major, and there's a little 2-5-1 movement to the relative minor, but apart from that it's kind of rooted in F major. There's a lot of movement in terms of going ups and downs in tones and semitones, as opposed to more of a functional harmony approach. And so when the chord tends to change, you need to think in terms of another melodic idea from a different sound world, a different scale, although there are similarities between the two, between chords. So for example, first one, F major 7 going to G flat major 7, there are common notes like F and C, which I implied in another lesson. But generally you'd have to think slightly different. So let's just look at the chords. First chord 1, flat 2, chord 1, flat 7 because normally it'd be an E, so we made it E flat, 6, flat 7, 6, and then we keep 6, just descend the bass line, and then chord 4, but it's minor, normally it should be major, 3, then 4, but this time major 7, and obviously has a major third, a 2-5-1 into D minor, so that has the typical minor 7 flat 5 and an altered chord is over to D minor, and then we've got 2, flat 2, chord 1 but now minor. That's determined really because by the melody, because the melody goes. Just to note that Joe Henderson treats that as an F major chord in his first solo, well, first chorus, and even that says F minor, and he can do that because there's only a bass and no piano, and also the movement to the relative minor, which is D minor in the Stan Getz version, he goes to D major 7, and his lines have major thirds, which in concert is F sharp. And my advice is, if you want to do that, great, but make sure you tell the piano player or guitarist and the bassist, otherwise you're going to be playing F sharps when the band's playing F minor. Just looking at the second chord, which is a major 7, I tried to imagine why that worked, and I thought, well, it's a tritone substitution for chord 5 because G flat's a tritone from C, so kind of works with the bass. Chords would be it'd be a bit limp if I put in a C7 chord there, especially because the tune is on an F, which is the 4th. But the concept's there. Now in the Joe Henderson version, you've got a lovely bass line that does that, but it also incorporates another chord. So the bass goes F, C, D flat, G flat. That movement there is quite an interesting idea, because instead of going chord 1, 2, 5, they've done tritone substitutions for chord 2 and chord 5. So the tritone from G is a D flat, and the tritone from C is an F sharp or G flat. But rather than make them the same kind of chord, so instead of making this a minor and this a dominant, both of the chords are replaced by major 7ths, or that's implied by the bass notes, because obviously isn't anybody playing a chordal instrument with Joe Henderson. So that sounds like. which sounds lovely. And if I put the tune, it would sound like this. So that's a nice idea to approach, well, to take it out of the key and then back again. But anyway, as I said, it's probably just determined by semitonal movement. Bar 4, we've got a flat 7. So E flat is a tritone away from A, and that makes much more sense because the next chord is D. So really the E flat is a kind of tritone substitution for D minor. So instead of going like this, the music goes, and then you do the same on the next bar because that's also E flat there. Next bar is that D minor chord where I'm just going to treat it, the whole bar as D minor. Chord 4 is minor, well, chord 4 should be major. Chord 3, chord 4, but this time it's major, and a major 7. Movement to the relative minor. Or in Stan Getz's case, he does this, thinking he's going to go to the minor, but he doesn't. He does this, goes to the major. And then we've got the ending with the tritone substitution, or that's the concept, as in bar 2, and now chord 1 is minor, whereas before we had chord 1 as being major. Some interesting ideas there. The tritone substitutions really refers more to the bass notes. The chord types are quite different to what you would normally associate with tritone substitution. And there are a variety of alternatives put forward by Stan Getz and also Joe Henderson. So even though there's a chord sequence there, they've found little ways to make it a bit more personal, a bit more, you know, changing the harmony can do that, and some of their language, although they both share, you know, some similar ideas in terms of note choices, they're basically quite different approaches in their character, but both equally useful to play. So it's probably great to play along with the record, and maybe you can play it out full speed after a while. I know I got there in the end, but it takes a bit of practice. Anyway, that's the final lesson on Beatrice. That was the final lesson on Beatrice. If you'd like to see more lessons on how to play jazz tunes, if you join me at my address, which is www.jazzsnippets.com, there are more videos there where you can learn how to play many other jazz tunes.